Hello, everyone. Welcome to New Polities Podcast. I'm very excited to be here with Mr. Jacob Hyman and guest of honor, Chuck Marohn.
It's really great to be here. Thank you.
Chuck, of course, is the leader of Strong Towns, a nonprofit, but I think actually I'm going to toss it to Jacob, who's been here with us on the podcast. You might remember him from the series we did, Good Cities, where we talked a lot about the new urbanism and its intersection with radical Catholic theology and philosophy. And by radical, I just mean mostly St. Thomas Aquinas. So, Jacob, I know this is a sort of three-way situation. Would you please introduce the man?
Sure. So, Chuck Marohn, as his friends call him. I hope to call you
please.
A friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Chuck is a civil engineer, an urban planner. I guess most notably, I know your story being you were an engineer in the late aughts, designing infrastructure for municipalities, and you personally interested in finances, started to also look at the municipalities' finances, noticing they can't pay for this new infrastructure. They're having to get grants for it. But also they can't pay for the infrastructure that they've already got built. They can't maintain it. And you scratched a little bit, you tugged the thread, and you noticed that this was not something that was unique unto these cities, but part of the larger pattern of development in North America that we've been engaging in since the Second World War. You started writing about this in the fateful year of 2008. And people started reading enough that in 2011, you incorporated as a formal nonprofit to, with just a little bit of money and some people, to fundamentally change the way that we think about development in North America. And now in 2025, you have a local chapter program that has over 300 local groups. I lead the one in Steubenville and have for the past 2 years. You've authored multiple books. You just spoke in Steubenville, and we were grateful to have you. The talk brought over 100 people in our community to come and listen. And you're a man of faith. You're Catholic. And Strong Towns is a big tent, nonpartisan group. But I know also you think about, from a first principles standpoint, how this analysis of how we should be building our cities to both be financially resilient and build up wealth in terms of its community, how that intersects with your faith. And that's why we wanted to have you on. So thanks for being here. That was a
marvelous introduction.
So. Fantastic. Yeah, I was like, I think my work is done here.
Get up and go. Yeah.
No, that was great. Thank you. Yeah, it's cool to be on a podcast that actually downloads on my phone. So yeah, I do a lot of podcasts, but I rarely have subscribed. I don't get invited on ones I've subscribed to.
Awesome,
so so we're good.
Great.
How did you
And what? The magazine subscription is a very reasonable price, Chuck. I think I could have probably sold it to you later.
Yes, we had I have to give a shout out to him. You'd heard of Strong Towns because we had a friend who was visiting Steubenville who happened to be making his way to Brainerd, and
came out to eat with me at my favorite restaurant.
Yeah, and he was our British emissary, Mr. Jamie Nugent, who brought with him a number of copies of the New Polity magazine, gifted it to you in 2023. Mm-hmm. So you've been aware, and nice to hear listening to some of this stuff since 23.
Yeah. Small world, Chuck. There's so much we want to ask you, but I think for the sake of the podcast and for our whole audience, maybe just you've got a main line as well, which is that you have a explanation for the decline of American cities. And it seems like before we get into details, it would be an injustice not to let you say something to that effect. So if I can ask you, what are the three main reasons for decay and decline in American cities today? What do you think?
We talk about the suburban experiment as this post-war change in our development pattern. And that oversimplifies it a bit, but we as modern Americans think, okay, humans of the past walked everywhere they went. And today we drive everywhere we went. And so cities are different now, of course, because we drive. They didn't have automobiles. If they had automobiles, they would have built cities differently. What that belies is that you can go around the world to places where they clearly have automobiles and they don't build cities like us. Why do we build cities the way that we do? And I think the main characteristic of modern American development, post-war, last 75, 80 years of building cities, is that we build all at once and we build to a finished state. Every other human civilization throughout all of history built iteratively over time. They would build something very small, and then when it worked out, they would expand on it, and then they would expand on it, and it would grow. I describe a culture growing in a petri dish. That's what you would have seen a city growing as, really up until modern times. Our astounding level of affluence and our astounding level of resources allowed us to think that we could solve every problem just by throwing money at it. And the thing is, the big problem we were dealing with in World War II was not sliding back into the Depression, and investing in highways and water systems and sewer systems and subsidizing housing and subsidizing commercial growth and doing all this. This did actually solve that problem in the short term. And we did not slide back into the Great Depression. We grew. This time we all still kind of nostalgize this post-war boom. But what happens when you build things to a finished state is that you belie what we understand about just entropy. The physics of a city are that things start to fall apart. They start to age. They start to decay. That is a natural, like, physical trait of everything. Entropy suggests we are all seeking the path of greatest chaos. I feel like as a Catholic, we're in a continual fight against human entropy, right? Like, we're part of Catholicism is this framework to help us lead the lives that we're called to. I think what we have done is we have created a approach to building places that today can give us a financial sugar high, but puts us in a position where we commit to more than what we can financially sustain.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, when you go out and build a new development, and you put in the sewer and the water and the roads, and you figure out how you're going to provide police protection and fire protection to it, that is going to come at a cost. A cost immediately, which you can sometimes roll into the mortgages people have, and maybe you get a grant from the state for part of it or what have you, or you take on a little bit of debt yourself as a community to make this happen. But it also comes with this long-term cost, this long-term liability. When you move into that house, the community has promised you through the city that if you pay your taxes, we'll fix your road. Mm-hmm. If you pay your taxes and your utility bill, we'll provide you water and sewer. And when you look at the math behind that promise, what we see is that, yeah, we can build it and make it happen, but to financially sustain it, we're often collecting 10 cents, 20 cents on the dollar of what is actually needed to do that.
Yeah, we're not getting enough in taxes.
There's not enough revenue coming in. Yeah. And I think, for me as a young engineer who was seeing this happen over and over, the response from the leadership was, well, we need to raise taxes. Mm-hmm. People are just not paying enough. People aren't paying their share, or like whatever your mantra was about taxes. There was another mantra then that, well, government's just wasteful, it's inefficient, it just, doesn't function well. And for me, who kind of embodied, like, I was in the government working on this stuff, I was doing it as a consultant, but you're working right alongside of the people there. The infrastructure systems are not inefficient. They're highly efficient. The taxes aren't low. People are paying a lot in taxes and a lot in fees. And I started to actually, like, as Jacob said, scratch the surface. And I realized that, like, we're not talking a 5% increase in taxes here to make this work. We're talking about a 400% increase in taxes just to have a chance of making it work. The numbers weren't close. And so yeah. When you recognize how ridiculous the math is behind this development pattern, it opens up all kinds of questions that I've really been exploring for over 20 years now.
Would it be fair to summarize your findings by saying that we built something that we could afford to build, but we could not afford to maintain, and that the natural you describe as the incremental building that we rejected in order to have this more sprawling build model, that the reason that worked well without creating that kind of great financial liability that we can't pay was that you when you just make the next step, it's people only make the next step that they're sure they can pay for. I think there's a parable from Christ about this, right? Who among you who builds a tower builds it without calculating the cost, right? Is the basic common sense there.
It's funny because that parable, the assumption is that only a fool would do that, right? I mean, like literally Jesus is saying, we all know this.
I know.
Clearly. And so, there's like a cultural assumption. And to me, what's interesting when you dig into that cultural assumption is that the wisdom of building cities, the wisdom of how we build places, whether it's a small town of Nazareth, which is literally like a small settlement, or whether it's a major city like Jerusalem, you're building off of inherited wisdom. In a sense, people tried this in the past. Some of them did it really poorly, and those people died or underwent some hardship and it didn't work out. And other people did it really well, and their ideas promulgated to other places, and those were the things we copied. So by the time you get to even Nazareth and Jerusalem, let alone New York City and Steubenville and my hometown of Brainerd, you're talking about thousands of years of like accumulated wisdom on here's how you build a place that will harmonize all these different human things. Yes, we could build a whole bunch, but then we couldn't afford it. Yes, we could put our cemetery here, but then because it would be in the middle of the town at some point, and that's not going to work. Yes, we could put our sewage over here, but it's not going to work out right. We could put our church here, and then everybody can see it, and that has this like social aspect that we're really working towards. There are all these like understandings that you see evolve and emerge out of the practice of city building. What we figured out, I wouldn't say so much that we could afford to build it, because I think we could always afford to build the next thing, right? Like sometimes it's just our labor. I think what we found out is that we could throw gas on the fire and generate a lot of heat. And so we just kept throwing gas on a fire. And you've probably had like a fire where you throw some propellant on it and you're hoping to get it lighted and really burning. And I think our theory was, well, if we just keep throwing gas on the fire, the whole thing will catch and grow. What we haven't done is we haven't put the logs underneath. We haven't like nurtured the thing that would actually combust. Yeah. So our economy has become a lot of lighter fluid. And not a lot of like substantive things that actually burn and generate heat.
Are we still building
yeah,
it's just the same.
Well, I'm here, in Ohio. Mm-hmm. I was able to visit 3 cities here, including Steubenville, but also Marion and Akron. And it's astounding because this part of the country has really, really struggled. I mean, you look at places that have suffered the most under this development pattern, and this place is high on that list. Mm-hmm. Yet there's a commitment to continue doing it. I mean, there is almost like a cultural consensus that if we could get the next big box store, the next Dollar General, the next gas station, that somehow that would get us over the hill, and we would start to see this, momentum build. Like that would be the bit of lighter fluid that finally got the fire to burn. Yeah. And I think that the one thing that amazes me about coming here is, there's many things, but one of them is in Ohio, you would think we could see how it didn't work. Yeah. Right? Like the debate wouldn't be so hard about, do we continue doing this or do we do something different?
Yeah. Yeah, what is that? Is that just human failing, Jacob? I mean, like you think about here in our town, you're right. Mm-hmm. It should be very obvious. For instance, we tried we emptied out the downtown through sprawl. We built a mall outside, and then the mall failed. It's currently foreclosed on, and
it had like up
for auction. If anyone wants to buy a mall,
45 year lifespan.
Yeah, and so
shorter than some of the downtown department stores that people fondly remember. Right. That it's now been demolished.
But there is definitely still this effort to, well, we're going to buy them all, get them all back. I mean, is this simple as they were good times and people remember them? And so
No,
it's hard to...
I feel like it's important to dig into your comment, Jacob, about the department stores that people remember. We remember because we see the photos, sure, and we maybe talk to people who went to them. But what is missing from that is a recognition that you never started with a department store. What you started with was like a small little general store. And, back in the days, it might have had a saloon in the next to it and a brothel next to that and a pool hall next to that. Like these were, not the greatest places in the world. Sure. But that evolution of the department store started as a little general store where maybe they sold a little bit of clothes as part of it. Yeah. And then as the city grew big enough, you could support a clothier, and then you could support 2 clothiers or 3, and then you support people selling shoes and hats, and like there was this whole like ecosystem of things that all of a sudden as a community grew, you were able to support. Eventually, those buildings too had lifespans. They fell apart. They were replaced with other buildings. But if your fire was starting to build, the next log you put on was going to be even bigger. It was going to be even bigger. And so you worked up to basically having like a big department store. This is the thing that we built up to. And had the city continued to evolve, you would have gotten more department stores, and they would have been in different neighborhoods, and they would have been bigger. What we did is we walked away from that, and we said, we're going to try this new experiment, this new way of building, and we're going to go build a mall. And the mall, like every other building, has a life cycle. And when the life cycle went away, there's just not any economic reason to rebuild and re-inhabit and resuscitate that mall. And so yours dies. Akron's died. Marion's died. Mine died and was brought back to life as public offices and, like marginal, not the mall, because now we have the big box stores, right? Mm-hmm. It creates this rolling blight because you never actually have a financial incentive to take care of the things you've built. The financial incentive is to go out and build something new.
I think something that I've been thinking about personally and is kind of clicking with me here now is how you are saying we only build now to a completed state. We build all at once, and how that relates to because a Christian virtue of poverty, in that what you're identifying is like our ancestors, they didn't have sewer and water, electricity is new as an invention as it is around the same time that a lot of the centralized systems came online. And we now expect anytime we build a home in North America, it's going to have all those amenities. What you're not saying is, or you're celebrating the wealth that's been built, but you're saying it was built over time. And we are so expectant that any new thing that we do has to be at this greatest degree of wealth. And I guess to frame it as a discussion question is, you are encouraging us to be poor in the way that we go about trying to identify the problems within our city. And that we ourselves have to, the things that we think about the immediate things are not going to get this biggest tax boon in the short term, isn't going to get the quickest job growth in the short term. It's going to require us to actually think, how do we do a not flashy thing?
Well, yeah, it's like you're saying that one of Chuck's principles here is that even if you're rich, act like a poor person.
Well, we have, as a society, squandered an astounding amount of wealth that was bequeathed to us. Yeah. Your downtown was here in Steubenville, my downtown and my hometown. These were astoundingly wealthy places. I mean, the buildings that have been built, the wealth that had gone into that, the bricks, the marble, these are just crazy places. We had a depot building at the train station that we tore down to build a strip mall. And my dad was telling me, I didn't see it. This happened when I was really little, but my dad was actually telling me about it. And my grown adult dad, broke down in tears. He had tears in his eyes, describing the grandeur of this building. Now it is a bad strip mall, a really, really bad strip mall, in the middle of town. So we squandered a lot of wealth. I think I understand what you're saying, but I would actually say it differently. We are poor. Like we are able to generate an immense amount of things that are transactions that make us look maybe wealthier than we are. We are able to, I've got my $2,000 cell phone that I can make monthly payments on. I've got a car, even I've done Exodus 90 multiple years now. And part of the Exodus 90 program is you go 90 days without a warm shower.
We're not getting paid for this one. They do like promotionals.
Do they really?
You really genuinely did it. You're awesome. No,
okay. It's an astounding program.
Yeah.
Doing a cold shower in Minnesota in the winter.
I can't imagine.
I travel a lot, so I go down to Florida and you like turn the shower cold and it never gets cold. Yeah. Let me just say, in Minnesota, it comes out of the ground at like 33 degrees. It's very cold. So you do a legit cold shower. And to me, one of the amazing recognitions is that 50 years ago, nobody had warm water like that. Now we just take hot showers for granted. Around the world, like people don't have hot showers like we do. So in some ways, we have this amazing level of outward affluence. But if we look, the median family in the United States has a negative net wealth. 60% of American families, somewhere along that line, if their car broke down, like couldn't find the money to fix it. We're not a rich country. And when we go through at Strong Towns, we've looked at the balance sheets of dozens and dozens of cities. I can't point to a city in America that is not functionally broke, functionally insolvent.
What do you mean by that? Like
they have, by their own numbers, they have more liabilities than they have assets. They have spent more money than they can hope to bring in a generation. They have committed themselves to doing things that they do not have the ability to do, and their own numbers underestimate the gap. So what we have been doing, we started this thing called the Finance Decoder, where you can take the city's financial reports, which nobody reads, and you can enter them in a couple decades worth, and it will plot you up a graph that shows you the trend in your city. And every trend is down. Every city, the trend is down. And it's heartbreaking because we are broke. We have spent ourselves into insolvency. And it has robbed us of not just our wealth, but the capacity that wealth was supposed to have bought us. I feel like I'm dominating the conversation now, but let me...
Chuck, we want you to dominate the conversation.
Okay. I feel like part of the building of Catholicism is... The building that we are asked to do is to really bequeath a better life to people who come next. And there's a certain stability that comes with that. We were able to, when my wife and I first got married, her grandfather passed away and we inherited a little bit of money. And I'm not pretending that we're incredibly virtuous, but the thing that we recognize with this is that we weren't expecting it. It was not something that we had earned. And it was not something that we felt we could spend on a vacation or a new, like, whatever. We something we coveted. What we thought we were obligated to do with this was save it. Because what this was him giving to us stability that we otherwise wouldn't have. Yes. So if something goes wrong, if something goes bad, we have this stability. And we've talked to our kids about, like, we're saving money. And someday, like, that will be for you, but it's not for spending. It's for saving in case you need, like, in case something goes bad, right? This is what our ancestors did to us on a citywide basis. That's what the city was. It was a store of wealth where if we stopped growing or went through hard times or had whatever, like it would decay a little bit. You would take from it a little bit, but it was gonna be there in spades because it had been built in that really slow, incremental, stable, strong way. Yeah. And now we've just had 70, 80 years of sugar high. And we've really the saddest thing about the cities in Ohio is to see how much has been destroyed.
Oh, I know. You're living amongst ghosts sometimes if you get, especially someone above the age of 70, just to kind of start pointing to what was there. You know what kills me the most? I don't want to cry on camera. It's when they point to where the opera house of Steubenville was. Yeah. The opera house. Anyways,
we have our theaters. The theater that I watched Star Wars in, and used to go with my friends, and it's a parking lot now, and it's a parking lot. It's so offensive to me because the place that turned it into a parking lot is the kind of wealthy family in town. They bought it, tore it down. And it used to be that our like wealthiest families in town, these are people who sold their business for $5 billion. It used to be that like the benefactor of the community would, as a way to, we could describe all kinds of motives to it, but even if you ascribe selfish motives, would build the theater. I'm the sponsor of this. Like, I want to do great things. And in a way that would benefit everybody. Yeah. Our greatest benefactor in our community has bought the old theater, tore it down, and has a parking lot now with literal barbed wire around the top of it. Yeah. I walk by it and I just am sad because it's such a, it is a slap in the face for people who knew what was there, which is a shrinking percentage of the population. Right.
And there's so much to say about that. One of the sources of wealth that we inherited, of course, was our Christianity. And the Christian tradition had a strong influence on the behavior of the wealthy, most notably in that it would cause, within a Christian society, especially true in the Middle Ages, somewhere I like to think about a lot, but certainly true in America, that you would be filled with shame to make your wealth from a community, because no one is born wealthy. Like, you receive an inheritance, and you might be amazing and brilliant and do really wise things with it, and so be the cause of some great surplus in that sense. But you didn't learn your own language. That was a gift. You didn't get social stability. That was a gift from your parents, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea that wouldn't be moderated by that wouldn't be received as a debt that you feel obligated to give to the project of the city, which is larger than yourself, that would have been sin in a non-metaphorical sense. Mm-hmm. And even in America's history, if you look at our sort of early industrialists, you see the kind of crisis by which the faith was still held while we suddenly had new amounts of wealth that we simply had never dealt with.
Astounding levels of wealth.
And yet what you see is the same crisis. I mean, Carnegie is a great example that they actually, we sometimes knock the gospel of wealth as this sort of horrific version of Christianity. Actually, I think it was Christianity still trying to be in a world that was losing its faith, namely to have immensely wealthy people trying to articulate their wealth in terms of the Christian faith, and ended up building us some of the most beautiful buildings in our town, the Carnegie Library, for instance. Now that is truly gone. That ethic is not there. Interestingly, it remains, but it tends to remain among the poor. So you'll have a phenomenon, especially in the Black community, that if someone within a poor neighborhood makes it big, makes it rich, the amount of obligation to bring it all back,
that's a good point. It's just enormous.
Is massive. Yeah. You would be ashamed, desperately ashamed. And this is not just in the Black community, it's true in poor white communities. The idea that you make it big and you don't buy your mom a new house, you don't start something in your town, you would be filled with shame. And yet for our billionaires, I'm not trying to be simply bitter, but there's no ethic. It's like the ethic of Christianity is held by the poor, and the wealthy have totally abandoned it, and they're going to space instead.
Let me talk about our development pattern in a secular way, but I think in a way that reinforces your point. Imagine you are someone in the United States, and this would have been true throughout human history, but let's just take us where we were building new cities in the 1800s, and you came to Central Ohio to found a city, or a city was just getting started. Mm-hmm. and you were going to start a commercial operation there. You would show up and there would be a ramshackle little main street of a bunch of little like pop-up shacks that people had, bought the land really super cheap and tacked up the cheapest building they could. And now they're selling whatever out the front of it, or they got the saloon or what have you. And they're trying to make a go of it. The thing that you would realize right away is that your destiny, your wealth, your success was going to be tied to the success of everybody around you. And not in a like communal hippie kind of way, like, hey man, we're all in this together, but in like a literal physical sense. You would line up your building with the person next to you. You would make sure the sidewalk connected so that people could walk not just to your place, but by extension, everybody else is around you. You would front your building on the front of the street. You would put as much ornamentation as you could into it, because that would be not only how you would attract people, but it would also happen to just make the street nicer for everybody else. Yeah. Your signage would be subtle to your place. It wasn't like you were trying to shout from the rooftops about your place over others. You were in a sense in a collective thing where if you were the most selfish person on the street and you were going to do what was in your interest and your interest only, it would by extension benefit everybody else because of what you needed to do to get ahead. Okay. If you move to that same city in the year 2025 and you want to start a business and you want to undertake the same commercial activity, what is the thing that you would do? Well, you would want to tear down the buildings around you and have the biggest parking lot you can. You want to have the biggest sign that you can. You'd want to have the most obnoxious. You would not front the street. You would front whatever your parking lot was. You would create space that was essentially like isolated to everyone else, super convenient to get to, super convenient to get out of. Your best interest, your selfish best interest as a business owner would not in any way connect to anyone else around you.
Wow. And then like business stuff like, a participation in a chamber of commerce or some sort of like seemingly civic orientation of business is just a icing on the cake.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I do think that I am maybe a practical Catholic in the sense that I recognize that practicing Catholicism is hard. So why make it harder, right? Like when we make the smoother we can make the path to get to church, the more people can get to church, right? And the harder we make the path there. So I look at like a chamber of commerce or, the people in the old city weren't acting cooperatively because they were more altruistic than us. They were acting cooperatively often because it was in their own interests. And then it was just easy to do. Like the framework that you lived in a sense, kind of reinforced a cooperative spirit. So the idea that like we're working together to make sure our sidewalks connect, because that's the only way we're going to get business, means that I have to work with you and we've got to figure this out, means that when you come to me and say, hey, the Chamber of Commerce here would like you to join. I'm like, of course I'll do that. And then, hey, we're trying to raise a few money for some flowers in the street or to sweep the sidewalks. Well, of course, like we're connected, like we're working together. So what you've done is you've built a lattice and a framework structure that allows you to work cooperatively better. Totally. Today, we can shame someone into being in the Chamber of Commerce or say, hey, if you go, it's good networking. Yeah, but I got LinkedIn. Like, I don't know if I need that. It's kind of a pain. I feel like there is a lot of, I've found parallels and deep wisdom in Catholicism and how really when we build places and cities, when we organize our lives to make practicing the faith easier to do, it almost allows you to do it deeper, and like there's fewer obstacles to getting to where you want to be and need to be. And I think the same thing we can look at, just in a secular world, the way we build our spaces. Today, they're not, they make collaboration and cooperation much harder.
Yeah. It really fascinates what you're saying, because it's almost like that inherited wisdom that you'll often hear with like neoliberal capitalist types. They'll say something to the effect of, I mean, you all heard, right? Like competition ultimately benefits the whole community because but what I'm saying is that you're describing a world in which that was far more plausible.
Dude, Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, and it's always quoted as, you're not fed because of the beneficence of the butcher. Mm-hmm. He's his own profit motive and all that. The invisible hand. Adam Smith also wrote the Theory of Moral Sentiments, which is like the more important of the two. But it's the backdrop to the book. Mm-hmm. Yes, the butcher is out for his own profit. And that's why he is a butcher. And that's why he's going to create good meat for me. And that's why the meat's going to be of high quality. But you know what else? The butcher's going to look me in the eye. And he's also going to see me at church. And he's also going to see me in this other place. And there's a moral dimension to the transaction that gets lost in our modern economy because that was the water they all swam in.
Right. It's like we burned up the fuel of Christianity that was the social thing.
Yes.
And then tried to, and then made as we were leaving Christianity behind in the modern period, we were making comments about it that we didn't realize we're relying on the fuel of Christianity to be true. It's like, competition does generally can create social cohesion within a Christian society.
When you have these guardrails that keep it from becoming predatory and zero sum and right.
I want to bring up a point that I just found fascinating, and I don't know the question you're going to ask directly to it, but maybe you can think about it or articulate it here, which is your observation, like having brought up the Chamber of Commerce, these civic institutions that like perform this real function. And we see in Steubenville at least, and I think many towns, you can look around at old buildings of like social halls of fraternal institutions. We have a Polish athletic club here. We have a Masonic temple. We have an old Institute, International Order of Odd Fellows, an old Moose Lodge. The Franciscan University, the first building it ever occupied downtown was an old Knights of Pythias building.
Condemned by the church.
Condemned by the church, they took it over. And I mean, yes, and we have all the churches,
right,
which in their own, I mean, this is the American experience of secularism and deism, where we had the secular fraternal institutions, but when we had fraternal institutions, we even had them as secular, and they actually built buildings.
So my question off that, since I do wander around Steubenville, and I think about the fact that we were building at a level of inherited wealth that we no longer have, but we think we do. We think we're better than the past. That's just part of being an American and a modern, is thinking that you're better than whatever happened last. But when I look at these buildings, I think, oh no, what is going to replace? Where does a building come from? A building doesn't come from someone pursuing their private interest or something. It doesn't come from family life. It comes from association. And you can call it commercial, but like a building on Main Street is not there simply because there's some desire for money. Because the desire for money can just as well make us thrifty, can make us say, oh, we don't need to do this in a building. We can do this in a tin shed or whatever. Rather, it's the desire for representation as something larger than the family, which is, in America, has been those civic associations that gather up surplus wealth and can make something that no one family could do. I mean, it's very simple. It's not just the family suddenly starts producing a city when they make a whole bunch of money and have surplus. It's that families join together in larger associations, and these have a surplus through and those are what build up city infrastructure, or what really did build up our city infrastructure here. And now we're in this time where we have absolutely lost all of those mediating institutions, all of those civic associations. I mean, it's funny sometimes thinking about the sort of animosity between the church and the Masons, when in most small towns in America, there's a way in which they're just in the same boat. Like Masons can't find members, church can't find members. Masons are getting older without young people replacing them. Churches both have a big building with expenses, both can't maintain the building. It's like, well, maybe we could get together and at least cry about that. But in any case, what am I asking? I'm asking what can fill, in the hope for the restoration and revitalization of cities in America, what can fill the gap of civic associations which no longer exist, and with the rise of the internet, really, don't even have the motivation to make them exist, because all of our desire for association is being met in a digital form, which notably does not need a building.
So you're asking me a question I'm wholly unqualified to answer and don't really know. I've read Bowling Alone, which is
totally
Robert Putnam's book.
what I'm ripping off.
And I think the contribution that I would have to that is this idea that we have built space that is at its core antisocial. It's designed. The cities that we build today, the way we build neighborhoods, the way we build buildings, is designed primarily, almost exclusively, to facilitate financial transactions in our economy. And I'm saying that not even as like a negative, because we had economies before that had financial transactions. I think the word that I would struggle with is the exclusive part. I mean, that is what we have elevated over the rest. And so what you get is an economy where we are a society where we are all consumers first, and then we are everything else second. And I think the disruption that we're seeing is downstream of that. I in the world that I inhabit, doing strong towns advocacy work, planning, engineering, it's amazing to me that we hold up as examples these small little groups that will come together and do things. We celebrate this too. Like, we would be like, here's the group over here that put out the bench. Isn't that amazing? And here's the group over here that planted the flowers. And isn't that cool? Because it is, in our society today, such a novelty, 5 people coming together and doing something collectively for the public good. I think it's important for us to recognize that part of the wealth we have destroyed and given up is not just the financial wealth of our cities, but it's actually that social wealth where that was just a matter of course of what you did. Like, no one would have cheered for the people who put the bench together, because of course you put the bench out. Like, that's just what we do. We solve problems. I'm part of the Masons. I'm part of the Catholic Church. I'm part of we do these things. And there's been a lot of things written about, the Great Society damaging the family and undermining this institution and that. And I'm not as well versed in all of that. It's not my area of expertise. What is my area of expertise is the building of places. And part of what we sell is the exclusivity and the ability to, in a sense, be isolated from everyone else. That's the front of the marketing brochure for most of what we sell. And the thing is, for part of our brains, that's very attractive. In the same way that, lots of other vices are attractive to us.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
right?
The idea of just a seamless trip from an entertaining house into a cold car, into a parking lot, into a store, transaction without a person, back to whatever I was doing in my totally safe, humane world, which in my home is very attractive. Yeah.
I wrote at the end of my first book, I wrote about my mother-in-law, who's an amazing person. But I recognized early on in our marriage that my wife acts differently when my mother-in-law is coming over, when her mom is coming over. I could always know when Jean was coming over, because my wife would start really picking up the house. Yeah. And our house is not dirty and messy, but for her, it was like the countertops have to be cleaned off and they can't be clutter and there's got to be stuff. And I was kind of annoyed by it, because I'm like, she's your mom. She just loves you. She's not going to judge us. Why do we have to do all this? There was a certain respect thing of it. But I also think that for my wife, she wanted to be the best version of herself when her mom was around. I recognize that now in myself, that when she comes over, and, I've got a great father-in-law too, but my mother-in-law, especially when the kids were little, was very active in coming over and kind of me. When my mother-in-law would come over, I wanted to be the best version of myself around her, and so, I would make sure that I, was dressed not like a slob, and that things were picked up, and, the kids were always polite to their grandmother. And, there were these certain, I recognize that there's a part of me that would just rather not have her around because it's easier to sleep in and not tend to things and, you know, all that. But the fact that she was made me a better person.
Yeah.
And I think if you take that particular social interaction and then multiply it over the hundreds, thousands of people that our ancestors would have run across in a normal day, and you subtract all that from our lives, I do think that humans in isolation are never going to become the best versions of themselves.
Yeah, I think that's right. I
have a concluding question because we're coming up on our time.
Okay.
And you know, Chuck, something that I've reflected on within the church is how many of the, like, these institutions that we talk about, these like sort of social norms we talk about, which were just there, have now vanished. And a lot with the various cultural and social changes that have happened since post the Second World War. And some of the voices in the church can look at this, I think correctly, as this, even the church herself, like, lost an understanding of what these things were for. It's just like the marriage is a thing that happens. Like, I think within theology of the body circles, there's this reflection of the travesty that the sexual revolution was and is, but also that this gives us the opportunity, like, to actually understand what is marriage and what is it for, because it just became this institution that you did, but then everybody got divorced. We're asking these questions about work, about technology, and I think that's what's great about New Polity is what are these things that modernity has sort of taken for granted or changed, and what is the Christian understanding of them? And I think what Strong Towns is able to add to the question or add to that conversation is cities. There are these things that we've done for millennia, and now here we are in modernity. And like, I think the suburban experiment is akin to the sexual revolution in terms of this thing that we understood for thousands of years, and we're just going to do this totally new thing, and it's having all these ramifications.
Blow it up, we can do better. Yeah.
But what we're finding then is it's almost this rediscovery. What is the city for? Like, we can clearly see what we've been doing for the past 70 years now is wrong. You know, Pius the 10th, like, said we need to restore all things to Christ. And so what is this thing that we're looking at now as Christians in modernity with the city? And I think my question, to put it to a single question, is what in your life and your work with Strong Towns, what do you think is it for Christians now to, like, what is there to rediscover in the city? It's sort of original purpose that we're being asked to re-understand as we revitalize our towns today.
In a short phrase, the city is the habitat that makes us fully human. It allows us to be, in a sense, the best version of ourselves. I tell this story about how bees live in beehives. And if you were to go into a beehive and say, hey, we got a better idea here. Let's make a bee cul-de-sac over here. You guys can hang out over here. We'll do some bee frontage roads over here. And we'll just change this hive around and kind of optimize it for these other things. You would get a bunch of neurotic bees. And when we stand back and look at humans, I don't think it's crazy to say, when we take people out of their habitat, we get neurotic humans. That's what we have experienced, and that's what we see. I read this book years ago that looked at happiness across societies. And in the 20th century, the happiest, they reported in this book that the happiest that Americans ever were was in the 1930s. Now think about that. That was, by all accounts, the darkest days of the 20th century. You've got a war in the 19-teens, you've got a war in the 1940s, but you have this period of tension where you had gone through the roaring 20s, the happy days, all this expansion, liberalization of this and that, and the progressive revolution and all this. And then you get to the cold, dark days of the 1930s. My grandfather told me that he had to move out of his house when he was a teenager. He moved into the neighbor's farm, and they allowed him to sleep in the barn, and they would feed him, and he worked the farm. That was his existence in his teenage years. he told me he felt really fortunate. He had things better than most people. This was living in a barn in Minnesota, right? Like, it's cold in Minnesota. That would be pretty hard. And he said he had it good. So if you think of that period of time and you think about that level of hardship, why were these people so darn happy? And I feel like part of the answer goes to, like, what do you do when you don't have a job? What do you do when you don't have this atomization transactional thing pulling on you? What do? You read stories with your kids. You go for walks. You plant a garden. You do things that are meaningful with your day. Yeah, they didn't have television to watch, and they, I guess, had radio that they could tune into now and then, but it wasn't like a constant distraction. They certainly didn't have phones. What they had was human life, and they had cities to live that life in. And so they just existed in cities at a slower pace, and they were happier. I am bewildered because today, when you look at those same things, we are the most suicidal generation. We're the most unhappy generation. We're the most neurotic generation. We're the most depressed generation, the loneliest generation. And we throw those things out, and we all have our own causal factors, right? Like, oh, it's the phone's doing it, or it's, a generation ago, it was the TV is doing it. It's video games is, I remember Frogger was bad for kids, right? We laugh now because there's so much worse, right? But you look at this, and to me, it's hard not to see this backdrop of the habitats that we build for ourselves as being the device that has kind of undergirded all of this. And maybe I'll leave this as a last thought. If you, a lot of planners like to point to Europe and say, well, Europe is, a better place than America, and go there and experience it, and then let's build Europe here. It's a silly trope because it's never going to happen. We're not Europe, and we're not going to build European cities out of what we have today. But I will note that if you go to Europe, you do have a version of what our cities would have looked like prior to the Great Depression. That's what they still have for the most part. And they don't have the level of, they have smartphones, they have first person shooter games, they have automobiles, they have like all those things. They do not have the social tension that we have in the way we have it. Now, is Catholicism thriving throughout Europe? No. Right? So I'm not suggesting that like there's an easy thing here, but I am suggesting that a lot of the foundation that we built civilization on, we have literally ripped that foundation apart. And it's hard to build civilization. It's easy to tear it down. It's hard to build it. And when you rip out the foundation, all bets are off, right? Like, we're trying to figure out what this looks like in a stable way. And I think you see us going through the instability now in ways that are disconcerting to everyone.
One of the things that you left us with at your talk in Steubenville, last night, was the idea that, and it kind of makes more sense with what you just said, that since civilization building is hard and notably a social act, it's not something that an individual does. So the idea of having a plan for it is already probably the wrong plan, because it is an incremental process on the basis of human growth, both spiritual growth and then family growth. But it makes sense why you talk about that small step as being really what's available to us. The thing that happened, the thing that we have done, the thing that we have been doing and are doing, is a big plan. It was a big plan to do something new. Mm-hmm. And the answer cannot be just a better plan to do something new, right? It has to be the small step, the thing you can improve immediately, knowing that you're starting, that you're not just like hedging your bets and just doing some little thing that's available to you because all else is abyss and despair, but because you're beginning on the natural process of city building once again, which was those small steps, that incremental growth.
But by the way, this is why I feel very strongly that the church needs to lead on this. Because when you look out into the secular world and you say, what is needed to do this? The first thing that's needed is humility. humility to recognize that we screwed this up, right? The second thing is the ability to work at like the next increment of things. That what you have to do is you have to be able to trust that the little things that you do today will add up to something more. You have to be able to trust the other people around you. You've got to be able to work with them. Those are super hard sets of understandings to build in a secular world, because, you know, the foundation of it is this like belief that someday all these little things will add up to something greater than the whole. That's really hard to do. But in the church, even if it's not the Catholic Church, if it's just like the Christian faith, you actually have the starting seeds of all of those connections already in place. And so the idea of going out and taking the area around our church and making it an actual parish where people would live and thrive and all that, and then building out from that as an example to the world, I feel like we're the only ones positioned with like a head start on doing it.
Sure.
Does that make sense? I'm not suggesting that it can't come from other places and other people can't participate and be part of it. They certainly can, and they need to. But the ingredients of doing it are 90% social. Yeah. And those are the hardest ingredients.
Right. And hope is a virtue, that theological virtue in the nomenclature just means that it really does come from God. And one of the things that it enables is the ability to be motivated to act when there's no obvious thing to do that makes sense within your society, right? So Steubenville is a great example. I mean, you know, you can describe the whole world as being driven by the profit motive, and you can describe everything as sort of careful investments that you make in order to get rewards later. But if you approach Steubenville and say, okay, well, I'm an individual who maximizes my own utility by making trades, and I would like to ultimately win over all other individuals, you're just going to move away. Like, Steubenville is not a good bet for you. But if your motivation is otherworldly and you say, success in this world is not the ideal, my soul needs to become perfected through my actions, but that's okay. That is success, not the money, not worldly success. That actually paradoxically enables worldly success.
Well, I think to that, you said it's foolish, and you were talking last night, it's foolish for us to think that we're the generations that is going to fix the problems. It's like, no, what we're supposed to do is like just make it incrementally better. And it's not like we're not quietists. We're not consigning ourselves to not fulfilling our vocations. Like, we are actually going to work as hard as we need to, but being content with we're not solving the world's problems. And I think, Christ said, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his own soul? And like that, like gaining the world is that thought of like, we are going to be the ones to fix the problems of our town in this generation. But if you actually approach it as a Christian of I am here to do my part, you can't gain the world. Like, that's not even what you're striving to do. You're striving to help build this world anew, but you can't gain it. And nor can the next generation.
I feel like that's a great insight.
Yeah. So I think, Chuck, we're at our time.
Got to put you on a plane.
Got to put you on a plane. You got to go to Disney World.
I'm going to Disney World, yeah.
Where can people learn more about Strong Towns?
Strongtowns.org is our website, and there you're going to find, regular columns, podcasts. You can also, go on YouTube or any social media channel. We are there, Strong Towns, sharing stuff. I've been doing this for a long time, and so there's quite a repository of stuff. I think someone at one point said I've written 1.6 million words that are publicly available online. So like literally, you will get bored before you finish it all. Right. So go and read
it. I'll give my recommendation because I think we didn't talk about the 4-step process here, but so the piece you wrote about the Strong Towns. It's like the Strong Towns approach to public investment is an article that I keep coming back to when I want to introduce people to the 4-step approach, which is how you ended your presentation last night. So I'm not going to say what that is, so you have to go read the article. But I'd say Strong Towns approach to public investment is where you should start.
All right, everyone. So strongtowns.org. And then if you are new to this podcast, please subscribe to New Polity Magazine. We're doing a really big issue on AI that we're very excited to be releasing very soon. That's going to actually address a lot of the themes of alienation, loneliness, and lack of association that we were just talking about today. That's newpolity.com/magazine. God bless you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time.